You are listening to Fantha Tracks.
Because of the following special program, Wonder Woman and the Incredible Hulk will not be presented this evening.
I got Vanessa.
It's time to get all your Star Wars news in a single file.
That doesn't sound too hard.
Boom! This is Making Tracks.
This is the way.
Here are your hosts, Mark Newbold and Mark Mulcaster.
I know these people. They are brutal. Does this look Jedi to you?
That's not how the Force works.
They'll never see it coming.
Count me in.
You're listening to Making Tracks, and a very special episode as we return for the final time this time to Newark Showground and Festival of the Force, where thousands of fans gathered to enjoy the saga and some fantastic guests. You've heard many of them already on recent episodes of Making Tracks, but today, Ross Carter from The Acolyte, Jonathan Cass from Andor Seasons 1 and 2, Paul Blake, Greedo in A New Hope, and Michael Carter, who played Bib Fortuna in Return of the Jedi, all join me on stage at Festival of the Force. First off, it's Ross and Jonathan.
Feel free to applaud, they love this kind of thing. How's the show going for you guys so far?
Absolutely fantastic. I didn't know what to expect, but having turned up and seen all these lovely, enthusiastic people coming along to see us and a few other people, the live music's been great as well, some great stall holders. And Ross?
You know what? I did a con a few weeks ago in London. The first person that came up to me said, I didn't really like Acolyte. And I was why am I here? All I've had is people come up to me and say, oh, I really love the Acolyte, I really liked it. Now, I don't expect people to just say, I love the Acolyte because I'm there, but it's great to have people who really appreciate Star Wars and decent, good people who like all of Star Wars, but in varying degrees.
Well, because you're here, I will tell you I love The Acolyte. On that topic of The Acolyte, a new era, brave move for Lucasfilm to do, a different storytelling time period. What was your role in it and how did you get involved?
I got booked to be stand-in for Lee Jung-jae, who's Master Soul, the guy from Squid Game. What stand-in is someone who sets up the scene that the actor is in. So every scene that he was in, I had to set up in terms of them having the camera angles and looking at the lighting. So I would do all the hard work. Then Lee Jung-jae would come in and do his acting and make it look fantastic. I loved it. It's the best job I've ever done. Got to see every Star Wars set that he was on. Never get a chance to do that. I don't want any spoilers. Have you all seen The Acolyte? Has anyone not seen The Acolyte? You need to leave because I need to say what... Well, you know what happened to Master Soul, right? Yeah? Sorry, you should have watched it sooner. I didn't have any work because you know what happened to him. I couldn't do my stand-in job. And the director said to the producer, she said, Jason, this was Hannah Lee Culpepper, who's the director, could we get Russ to be the Jedi that switches off Pip? And I'm standing there really awkward, like with the producer and the director. And then Jason just looked, and I thought he was going to say no, and he went, sure. And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to be a Jedi. And so that's how I got my cameo in The Acolyte. So I did both, and it was the best job I've ever done. I was on it for 7 months, and it was great.
And is your character a named character?
Yeah, I got a named character. The character is Master James Semple. So he's a master, all the white robes, but I'm a Jedi. And I'm a Star Wars fan, so to me, you know, I come to these conventions myself, walk around, and I love it. I'm not just an actor who's doing a Star Wars role. I love Star Wars. So to me, it was like the angels have blessed me.
How cool. Jonathan, very relevant fellow at the moment because we're 11 weeks away from Season 2 of Andor. We know you from Season 1 of Andor as an ISB officer. To the people that may not know, how did that role come to you?
Okay, just first I'd like to say super excited for Season 2 coming out 22nd of April. It's been way too long. As you all know, there's been some setbacks because of the writer's strikes and the actors' strikes. This is why it's not come out. It should have probably come out at the end of last year. but it is coming out on 22nd of April, and I'm super excited for it to come out. How did I get the role?
Yeah.
To start off with, we get sent a text, and it will say, "Are you available to film on Pilgrim?" which was its working title name. I didn't know what it was at the time, but then I know people who know the working titles, so I contacted them, and I found out it was a Star Wars series called Andor. And I thought, oh, this sounds interesting, so I said I was available. The first thing they do is they book you in for a fitting. So I had to go to Pinewood Studios, turn up for a fitting. I had no idea what my character was. I had no idea what I was going to be in it. So I turn up to the studio. I walk into the fitting. I know the guy that's doing the fitting, the head of costume, because I've worked with him before. So I say hello to him, and then he just takes me to this curtain, and he pulls the curtain back, and staring at me is the Holy Grail. It's the ISB Imperial Officer's uniform, and I'm thinking, wow, I'm actually going to be an Imperial Officer. And inside I was grinning like an idiot, grinning like the 11-year-old boy that lined up outside to watch Star Wars A New Hope back in Crawley Cinema way back. And so I basically got fitted in the uniform. Took ages to fit because they're very particular about how they look, how you stand in them. And that was the start of my Star Wars story.
When you saw the uniform, because the scene, it's a bigger room, it's a beautifully designed room as well on Coruscant, but did it evoke or did it remind you of that classic briefing room scene in the original film?
It did, and the way they made the set and the way they made us look, because a lot of the Star Wars films previously, they wanted very short military-style haircuts. But on Andor, they've gone back to the 70s style of set, the 70s style of how we look. So a lot of them had sideburns, longer hair. So, and it did, when stepping onto the set, it did feel like stepping back in time to the original trilogy.
Yeah.
So it was a very, very special moment.
Makes you realise there's kind of fashion trends in the Star Wars galaxy as well. Even though we're reaching for that 70s look, it kind of plays into the fact that sometimes, it's like Star Trek, isn't it? Sometimes they'll have the sideburns and sometimes they don't. I know, I said the naughty word. So when you're in that scene, you're in that sequence, how long would a day be for you on a set like that? And it's a similar question to you, Ross, as well. You know, how long are you sort of involved in a day-to-day thing?
Well, Jonathan will know as well, as a stand-in, you're probably involved a lot more because you're doing multiple scenes if you're standing in for a certain character. But to actually film a scene, depending on what the director's take on it is, you could be there for hours just doing a very small scene. Or you could just be there for 20 minutes because the director just doesn't want too much. But you can be there all day. Just an example, this isn't Star Wars, but I did Batman, you know, the new one with Robert Pattinson. You know, when he's walking down the corridor when the DA's been killed, and all I had to do was look at Batman. How great is that? I just had to watch him. It took 3 or 4 days for that scene, him walking in with Jeffrey Wright. So it can take a long time to do a scene, but it's dependent on what the director wants.
And in a sequence like that, for example, are you required to know the script as well?
Not for Batman, but for The Acolyte, I did have to know the script because when you stand in, you have to recreate it before the actor does it. So, for example, if you see The Acolyte, you know when all the kids are sitting down, I see fire, I see this. I had to do the script with these kids walking around how JJ was a nickname for Lee Jung-jae.
Yeah.
So I'd be walking around doing the script. So you would need to know the script sometimes. They'd want you to do it in a rehearsal before the actor did it.
That's fascinating.
Hi, this is Danielle from The Acolyte, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks.
When you had your chance to not only be in the Star Wars galaxy, but also join the Indiana Jones universe, how exciting was that for you? Because we're a similar sort of age, so those films hit at a similar sort of time for us. So how was that for you?
Well, I tend to get 2 roles in life. One's an Earth Nazi and the other one's a space Nazi. So it must be, I don't know what it is about me, but yeah, I don't know. But anyway, yeah, no, that was another fantastic, I never thought they would make another Indiana Jones. And I never thought I was going to be in it. And I never thought I was going to play the iconic role of a Nazi.
Yeah.
And yeah, just to do that was, we went to Bamber Castle just outside Edinburgh. We were there for 6 night shoots, starting at, say, 7 o'clock at night, ending at 7 o'clock the following morning. They kept us in the hotel in Newcastle, which is a great city, by the way, absolutely love it. So we spent 6, we didn't get to see much of it because we were doing night shoots. Yeah, but it was filmed at Bamber Castle, getting blown up, shot at, driving Second World War military vehicles, and watching Harrison Ford get dragged into the castle by 2 other Nazis. What's not to like?
Totally. I've got to say, if more Nazis were like you, the world would be a better place.
Well, thank you.
I think we all agree.
Ross? Not quite sure about that.
Along with the stuff that you've done in The Acolyte, and you mentioned Batman, you also worked on, am I right, 2 of the Jurassic films?
I worked on Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom.
Yeah.
It wasn't a big part. I was one of the evil businessmen in the auction rooms. But I did Spider-Man Far From Home.
Yeah.
Where I was part of Nick Fury's ops team. So I was in, he was in Venice, he was in Berlin, London and Prague. So I was working with Samuel L. Jackson on set, and it was the first time, before anyone had seen it, I saw Mysterio's costume.
Nice.
And I'm like, oh my God, I wish I had photographic memory and I could print this. Because, yeah, I've done Homecoming, I've done I've worked a lot, it's probably the same sort of time as Jonathan. And
yeah.
I've worked in a lot of different things, but I prefer the Marvel or contemporary Star Wars stuff. That's my, all of the modern stuff.
And as a performer, as an actor, as the various things that you guys do, is it satisfying to know in these big films that you're in there, you've got a role in that? Because for a big machine like that, there's so many moving parts. It must be a real thrill to that's my sequence, that's my moment, to be able to pick that out.
Yeah, I mean, as primarily a supporting artist or an extra, as we're known as, a lot of the stuff we do can be deep background stuff. So, we don't get to be in with the action all the time. So when we get picked for, we're sort of more featured supporting artists, sort of supporting cast, if you like. So to get picked to be in close scenes with the big actors of the film, it's a very special moment. And I'm sure Ross will say the same thing. It just makes you up your game.
Yeah.
As soon as you know you're not deep background, you're not doing a banana, as they say, from one side of the road to another, and then reset and start again, and the camera's like half a mile that way. To actually be near the camera and be in a scene with the main characters, it just, you have to step up your game, and it just makes everything, I just makes it way more interesting than just walking around in the background. So, yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, guys. Big round of applause, please.
Thank you.
For everything in one location, daily news, reviews, interviews, podcasts, video, and social media feeds, bookmark FanthaTracks.com for Star Wars news 24/7, 365.
The final panel of the day was with 2 Star Wars legends, Paul Blake, who played Greedo in Star Wars, and Michael Carter, Bib Fortuna in Return of the Jedi.
Our final 2 guests of the day are approaching the stage. I don't think they can hear me, but if you'd like to start a round of applause, I'm sure they would appreciate it. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks. Hello, guys.
How are you enjoying the convention?
Awful. Dreadful place. Terrible people. I don't know what to do, really. No, it's been fantastic. I mean, everybody here has been charming, like they always are. So I've had a good time. Have you had a good time, Mike?
Yes.
Good. This is Michael, my long-known friend from years back.
How long have you known each other then? Have you worked together in days past, just socially, or?
Never worked together, have we, Mike? No, I haven't had that pleasure. I suppose through these things, really, we've mostly met. But that's kind of how it's been over the last 30 years, really. We learnt more from you guys about what we did in the films than we ever did from each other, really.
We just had Andy Seacombe on stage, and one of the last things he said
Never
was...
mind, you can always get rid of him. He's.
I have control of the edit, so it's good.
Oh, good.
One of the things he said was, when he first did his role as Watto, and then got invited to a convention, the logic of, what on earth's a convention, what do I do? What did you guys think when you got invited to your first conventions? Did you know what to expect, or...?
No, I had no idea what to expect at all. We were told nothing about it. It was all very secretive. I mean, I was told the film was called Blue Harvest. It was an alien, that's all I knew. And then I started doing this pre-production stuff, head casts, hands. But I still didn't know what it was going to look like.
When you go through that process and you see yourself in the mirror for the first time and the contacts in and the whole bit, is that quite a shock?
Well, it was, I had no idea what it looked like. There were no sketches, really, that I was shown. I was shown an original maquette, a little sculpture, and told that it wouldn't fit a human head, so they'd have to improvise around that. And they put me in the chair and they turned me away from the mirror so I couldn't see myself, and slapped it all on, and then I stood up and walked to a full-length mirror and I saw Bib. And I saw what it was like for the first time. That was it.
And Paul, for yourself, slightly different, because obviously you can see Michael's face in and around the makeup. Yours was a mask, so it was a slightly different deal. But similar question, when you pull that thing on for the first time and see yourself, did you on set get to see yourself with the mask on?
No, not really. I mean, Mike is interesting because his image as dear old Bib is, I think, one of the most striking of all the characters in all the Star Wars. I think it's probably thanks to you that it has a sort of menace and evil to Bib, which you don't get in many of the other characters. But it's certainly a striking image, I thought. But poor old Greedo, no, I didn't, like Mike, I didn't see. There were no storyboards in those days or anything to show us what the characters would look like. So it wasn't so much a shock. Although in 60 years of being an actor, I've only ever worn a mask twice. And Greedo was really the first time. The second time was in a series of Greek plays where you kind of expect to wear a mask. So I suppose it was a bit unusual, but then you were kind of used to anything in those days. Certainly in the 70s, people flung you in all kinds of costumes. But Greedo was kind of easy in a way. It was the Edith Evans approach to acting, is once they stuck all that on you, it showed you the way forward on how you would be, what kind of character you would be.
And so in that sense, how you've described that, finding the way he moved, he had a menace, he was a bounty hunter, so he's after the hero or one of the heroes of the film. So was that quite, I'm not saying easy, that's not the right word, but did that come to you fairly quickly, the movements and such?
I think you're absolutely right. I think easy is the word. I mean, Greedo got together in bits because his hands came later on, those silly sort of fingers that you see.
Yeah.
Because originally they were big gloves, but eventually they were gardening gloves. That's how cheap the design was. They were gardening gloves which had little tubes sewn onto them. And I mean, I couldn't even hold the gun, let alone shoot Han Solo. So, I mean, I think it was, my costume, I'm sure it was the same with Mike, came together and therefore then presented how you would use it, because you couldn't work in any other way, you know. Yeah. I mean, feet and shoes weren't anything I gave much consideration to. But the shoes, again, came from, what size are you? Oh, yeah, we've got those up there. That's what Greedo wears. So
like being at a bowling alley.
Yeah, exactly, like being at a bowling alley.
And Michael, with Bib, Paul mentions the menace, which is evident, but he's also quite obsequious with Jabba. He's sort of preening and brought, for the time that he's on screen, there's a fair few facets to the character, isn't there?
Well, I hope so, yeah. I mean, he's completely dominated by Jabba. I mean, I think Bib was probably actually a very nice young man who just fell into bad company. And there's this constant struggle within him between good and naughtiness, which I don't think comes across. But most of the time, all I was worried about was not walking into the scenery, because I couldn't see anything.
Were the contact lenses as bad as they looked? I mean, they look like
They were worse than they looked. They really were. At the end of the filming, I had abrasions of the cornea, which sounds terribly serious. It's not. The eye is very tough and it recovers, and I was young. And I was very well looked after by an optician called Richard Glass, who checked my eyes every day. And he told me that it would be a week, because I couldn't see anything. When I went home afterwards, I couldn't focus on the television or anything for about a week. I mean, my kids were just a blur for about a week after I'd finished filming. And then gradually I got my sight back.
Hi there, this is Mike Quinn. I played Nine Numb in Return of the Jedi and the new trilogy, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks.
Exactly the same. I mean, Greedo's eyes were two ping pong balls that had been sprayed black, and I couldn't see anything out of the eyes. I could see just the floor through the bottom of the mask. But I was really lucky because I only really had 2 steps into shot and then sat down, so I kind of knew that I wasn't going to bump into the furniture, which, I did.
Both of you have action figures, the classic 3 3/4 action figures. What were your first thoughts when you saw this little dinky miniature version of the character that you played?
I thought, thank God for Hasbro.
Yeah, I did too. It's just my second thought was, oh dear, I don't get any money out of this either.
It's actually right. I'm sure he won't mind me telling you this, but one of the few actors in the early days of the original trilogy whose face was seen on an action figure was Dermot Crowley. And Dermot, who's a wonderful actor, he sued Lucasfilm, and won because of his image. And poor old Dermot, of course, was persona non gratis for a good 20 years after that. But he did win the case because, obviously, all the original contracts, particularly on the first movie, were almost non-existent.
Yeah,
handshake. Handshake and a brown envelope was about it for the first film. But so the little images right from the word go, the models and the figures from Kenner and then Hasbro, are amazing things. And actually, it's the Star Wars franchise that led all the other franchises into, hey, this is a way of making money around the movie itself, and produced all the merchandise that you see. Incidentally, the man who sold George the entire merchandising rights for perpetuity is now in a concrete pillar somewhere in LA, hot and concrete.
In your time then, both of you, in your time associated with Star Wars, what's been the most surprising element? Is it meeting interesting people at a convention and being told a story? Was it perhaps something that happened on set? What would strike you as the most unusual and memorable thing?
I still don't quite understand why, after 40 plus years, it's still as popular. People are still turning up like today, and they are fans and they've got all the stuff, all the photos. I mean, I can't quite get my head around how it's managed to sustain itself that long. I mean, they're good films, but there's thousands of great films that everybody's forgotten about. But this whole thing just keeps going on. And it's also particularly weird when you get a little child coming up and they want your autograph or they want to, show you something. I had a kid who came up to me today who'd done a drawing of Bib, and he was about 7 years old, 8 years old. You think, well, that's great, but God, I mean, if you'd asked me that the day after I finished doing it in 1982, I'd have suggested you seek psychiatric help.
And he knows what he's talking about, yeah. I think that's the thing. I think then no one had any inkling. We couldn't wait to leave when we arrived. It was just another job from that point of view. So, because we all thought we were going to be in Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. Because in 1976, every sci-fi movie was a B movie. So no one had any hopes for it, apart from George. For George, it had to work. If it hadn't worked, that's the last you would have seen of George Lucas. But fortunately it did. It did have a certain magic to it when it came out. All to do with that brilliance of Industrial Light and Magic, which was formed specifically to do that, and God did it do it, and everyone has benefited from that ever since. Right. So without that certain little spark of magic wouldn't have been there, I don't think, because it was when you all saw it for the first time, and you all tell me this, and I remember it from seeing it for the first time myself, is that you hadn't ever seen anything like that in the cinema prior to that very first film. After that, yes, every other film had some element of special effect that owed itself to Industrial Light and Magic. But then, utterly unique, and I think that's helped its longevity. Also, George stole every great storyline there was and put them all together in one movie. I mean, it was bits of myth, it was bits of Old English, it was bits of old American folklore. Everything was thrown into the mix and somehow magically worked. So I think all those things added together have sort of led to its longevity.
That's very true. He was a magpie in that sense, wasn't he? But just to say, Greedo, we think of Greedo, we think of Han and Greedo and that whole sequence and scene. Bib Fortuna, I struggle to think of another character that led to that species being seen so often across Star Wars. I really do struggle. The only person I can compare it to, Jeremy Bulloch with the Mandalorian thing. So I think the work that both of you guys did in Jedi, in Star Wars, should be commended. Big round of applause, please, for our guests.
Email radio@fanthatracks.com. Head to links.fanthatracks.com for links to our social media feeds, Fantha Tracks TV and Fantha Tracks Radio. Thanks to James Semple for the Fantha Tracks intro, Blues Harvest for our Making Tracks opening music, and Mark Daniel and Vanessa Marshall for our voiceovers. New episodes drop Tuesdays and Fridays at 7 o'clock UK time. Our weekly news show, Good Morning Tatooine, goes live Sundays at 9 o'clock UK time on Facebook and YouTube. And remember, Fantha Tracks is absolutely free, so it costs nothing to stay updated on all the latest Star Wars news.
Coming up next on Fantha Tracks Radio, it's Making Tracks.